Okay, I have a little bit of a unique video lecture here for you on angular movements. Since we're talking about movements, it's kind of hard to show that in static images, so I have included quite a few GIFs here in this video lecture. Love to hear your comments below after watching it, which you may have liked or didn't like about this unique lecture series. So starting with just some of the background, we have our angular movements. What is that? Well, angular movements are produced by changing the angle between bones of a joint. When we have bending occurring, that's when the angle between bones decreases. Here's some of the categories we're going to be looking at: extenders, flexor, abductors, adductors, so on and so forth. And here's the description. Hopefully you find the GIFs a little bit more interesting and memorable to be able to make connections between these categories. So Flux On and extension. So this can occur in both the lower leg here. It can also occur in the head region. So if we look at our individual here, we have the green extending, and then flex on there going back, flex on, and the extending on the green. Looking at the blue leg, you'll notice that when it's going forward here, we have the extension, and then the flex on to the bend. Here's the flex on, here's the extension. Looking at the green leg, there's that flex on there, that moving back flex on, and extension. Now in the head region, the same thing can occur. Extension's moving backwards, and a flex on going forward. So we see initially the initial bow is the flex on, followed by the extension going back. Hopefully that makes it a little bit more helpful to remember these two. Moving on, we have rotation. Now there's two different types of rotation. We have a lateral and a medial rotation. So Joel McHale here, notice initially that rotation is a lateral rotation, followed by a medial rotation there. So that rotation of the head, that lateral, followed by the medial there, returning to that midline. So those are two different types of rotation. And then medial. Abduction and adduction here. So it's important to remember when we're going away, if you think of opposing, that would be abduction here. You see our femur and articulation of our ball and socket joint. Our abduction is when it goes away from the midline, and then adduction here is when as it's returning towards the midline. So abduction followed by adduction, return to that midline. Abduction and then adduction, return to that midline. Elevation and depression, looking here particularly at the mandible. So when the mouths are open here on The Simpsons, that's the depressed mandible. They're all kind of hanging the mouth open. And then Maggie helps Homer there. The elevation of his mandible, bringing it back up. So depression is down, and elevation is working its way back up there. Moving on, protrusion and retrusion. So we see the fish here. Initially, we see that protrusion as that jaw extends out, and retrusion as that mandible comes back in here. The woman at the lower point is pushing her chin in the retrusion position of her mandible. Pronation and supination, we see that here, where we're rotating our radius over the ulna, be the pronation. We see that here with Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon. We see that rotation that is occurring here. When they're both in the parallel position, that would be the supination, and when it's rotated over, that would be called the pronation step. Remember, supination, that parallel, is considered the standard orientation there. Also another video on the forearm pronation and supination there. Hopefully you found this lecture a little bit unique, interesting, and memorable.